It all began like any typical Friday night. My closest friend, Landon, had come over to hang out, just as he often did. We were lounging in the living room, sharing laughs and stories, when my stepmom, Veronica, made her way downstairs. At 63, Veronica had a certain aura about her, something that drew people in. I hadn't given it much thought before, but lately, I sensed a change. The way she dressed and the confidence with which she held herself suggested she was aware of the attention she attracted. Landon noticed it, too. I could see the way his eyes followed her movements around the house. He would sneak glances at me, but I remained silent. It was one of those unspoken things we both felt but never addressed. That evening, Veronica was wearing a silk robe loosely tied at her waist, revealing just enough skin to be hard to ignore. As she entered the room with 2 glasses of wine, she flashed a smile that made my heart race. "You boys seem to be having a good time," she remarked, handing us the glasses. "Mind if I join?" I shot a quick look at Landon, who appeared just as uneasy as I felt, yet neither of us protested. Taking a seat between us on the couch, Veronica crossed her legs, the hem of her robe inching up slightly. I attempted to concentrate on the television, but the growing tension in the air was palpable. I noticed Landon sneaking glances at her, while Veronica seemed to relish the attention. After a few minutes of awkward silence, she leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've noticed the way you two look at me sometimes," she said, her gaze shifting back and forth between us. My heart skipped a beat. Landon and I exchanged anxious glances, but the words hung in the air unacknowledged. Veronica smiled, her hand grazing my leg before it moved toward Landon's. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'm not upset. In fact, I've been thinking about it too." My throat went dry. I could see the confusion and excitement on Landon's flushed face. Veronica's hand lingered on his thigh, her fingers drawing small circles, testing the waters, and it was clearly effective. "I know I'm older," she continued, her tone soft yet inviting. "But that doesn't mean I don't still have desires. I've also noticed your interest." She shot a playful smile at Landon before glancing at me, her hand inching higher on his leg. My mind raced, grappling with the reality of the situation. This was my stepmom, yet her gaze and touch sent shivers down my spine, making it impossible to resist. Landon shifted in his seat, but he didn't push her hand away. Veronica's eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she leaned in closer, her breath warm against my ear. "I think it's time we stop pretending," she whispered. "I can feel the chemistry between us. Why don't we explore it?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My stepmom, Veronica, was proposing something I had never even dared to consider, at least not consciously. Yet, a part of me had entertained the thought. The way she moved, the way she smiled, the subtle touches. She had been teasing us for weeks, and now everything was coming to a head. Before I could respond, Veronica turned her attention to Landon, her fingers gliding up his arm. "What do you think, Landon?" Her voice was low and inviting. Landon's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened, a blend of shock and desire flickering across his face. He glanced at me as if seeking my approval, but I was at a loss for words. My heart raced, and a voice in my head screamed that this was wrong. Yet my body betrayed me. I don't know," Landon stuttered, his voice trembling. Veronica smiled, leaning in closer, her lips just inches from his ear. "Relax," she murmured, her hand moving up his chest, teasing the neckline of his shirt. "We're all adults here. Let's just enjoy the moment." Landon swallowed hard, his gaze darting between me and Veronica. He was clearly torn, but the allure was too strong to resist. Veronica leaned in and kissed him softly on the neck, her lips barely grazing his skin. Landon let out a quiet gasp, and I could see how his body reacted to her touch. He wasn't going to stop this. Neither was I. Veronica pulled back slightly, her eyes filled with desire as they locked onto mine. "And what about you?" she asked, her hand now resting on my thigh. "I know you've thought about this too." I hesitated to respond, unable to form words. My mind swirled with conflicting feelings. But then Veronica leaned in closer, her lips brushing against mine, soft and slow at first. It was a tentative kiss, but as I didn't pull away, she deepened it. Her hand slid further up my thigh while her other hand found its way back to Landon's leg. I kissed her back, my heart racing, my mind shouting for me to stop, but I couldn't. Her lips were soft and warm, and the way she kissed me made everything else fade into oblivion. I ceased to ponder what was right or wrong. All I could focus on was the sensation of Veronica's body pressed against mine. The way her touch ignited a fire within me. Veronica pulled back just enough for our eyes to meet. "Good boy," she whispered before turning back to Landon. She kissed him again, more confidently this time, her hand moving up his chest. I watched, entranced, as she deepened the kiss, her body pressing closer to his. My pulse raced as the heat between us intensified. Veronica was no longer holding back, and neither were we. She shifted between us, her hands exploring our bodies, her lips traveling from Landon to me and back again. The atmosphere in the room had become almost unbearable, and there was no turning back now. Veronica's hands were everywhere, on my chest, on Landon's back, drawing us closer into this uncharted territory. Each touch was electric, sending jolts of pleasure coursing through me, and I could tell from Landon's breathing that he was experiencing the same sensations. For what felt like an eternity, we were swept up in a whirlwind of kisses, caresses, and muffled gasps. Veronica was in command, directing our movements with her hands and lips, igniting a fire within me that I never knew existed. This woman, my stepmom, had suddenly transformed into the focal point of my universe, and all thoughts of anything else faded away. At one point, I felt her hand gently pressing against my chest, urging me back. I lay down on the couch, my breaths coming in short, quick bursts as she climbed on top of me. Her robe had fallen open, revealing more of her body, and the sight made my heart race. Veronica leaned down, kissing me with fervor, her hands gliding up my arms as she pressed herself against me. Landon was right there beside us, watching, his eyes filled with a dark yearning. Veronica turned to him, reaching out to pull him closer, sealing her lips against his once more. Her body pressed tightly against mine, and I could feel the warmth radiating off her. We were completely lost in that moment, intertwined as our breaths mingled, our bodies moving in perfect harmony. As Veronica kissed Landon, her hands roamed over my chest, fingers tracing patterns that sent thrilling shivers through me. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the sensations of her touch, the sound of her breathing, and the way her body moved in rhythm with mine. Time seemed to blur as the intensity built between us. Veronica's kisses grew more urgent, her touch increasingly demanding, and the passion surged to an overwhelming peak. Landon was right there, too, his hands exploring Veronica's curves, his lips finding their way to her neck and shoulders. Finally, Veronica pulled away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked at both of us, her eyes shining with a satisfaction I had never seen before. "You boys did really well," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I was utterly speechless, my mind still reeling from everything that had just unfolded. I glanced at Landon, who appeared just as stunned as I felt. We had crossed a boundary that could never be uncrossed, and there was no turning back. Veronica offered a knowing smile and leaned in to kiss me one last time, soft and lingering. "I think we all needed that," she said, her voice brimming with satisfaction. Standing up, she loosely tied her robe around her waist and walked out of the room without a single word. Landon and I remained there, sitting in silence, trying to digest the whirlwind of events. After a long, heavy pause, Landon finally broke the stillness, his voice trembling. "What just happened?" he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. I shook my head, grappling with the reality of it all. "I have no idea, man. No clue." We sat there a while longer, the weight of the night's revelations pressing down on us. We had always acknowledged Veronica's attractiveness, even her allure, but we had never anticipated that things would escalate the way they did. Now that it was over, I found myself wondering what this meant for our relationships. For me and Landon, and for me and Veronica. We had ventured into unknown territory, and I was left wondering what the fallout would be. When Landon finally got up to leave, he turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion and exhilaration. "Do you think this could happen again?" he asked tentatively. I didn't have an answer. All I could manage was a shrug. My mind was still clouded from the chaos of the night. Landon hesitated for a moment, waiting for me to say something, but I stayed silent. Finally, he gave me a half-hearted nod and walked toward the door. Just as he opened it, he glanced back over his shoulder. "Let me know if anything happens. Okay?" I nodded, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, sure." When the door clicked shut behind him, I was left alone, the weight of the evening's events settling over me. The house felt eerily quiet, almost too quiet. My heart was still racing, and I could feel the residual warmth of Veronica's touch, her lips, her body against mine. It felt surreal, as if I had just emerged from an intense dream, but this was all too real. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the empty room, my thoughts spinning in circles. What did this all mean? How could we possibly return to normal after what had just occurred? And the most pressing question lingered. Did I even want to? The following morning, I woke up feeling as if I hadn't rested at all. My head was swirling with memories of the previous night. Veronica was still in the house, just upstairs, and I had no clue how to face her. My mind replayed those moments relentlessly. The kisses, the touches, the intoxicating feeling of her body against mine. It all seemed like a distant memory, yet it had happened mere hours ago. Dragging myself out of bed, I approached the stairs, unsure of what awaited me. As I made my way downstairs, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. And there she was, Veronica, in the kitchen, dressed casually in a simple t-shirt and jeans, as if nothing had transpired. She looked up at me, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Morning," she said, her tone casual, as if it were just another day. "Morning," I replied, feeling awkward and unsure of how to act around her now. My mind flashed back to last night, but Veronica seemed completely unbothered. She moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast as though everything was perfectly normal. I stood there, feeling like an outsider in my own home, watching her until I couldn't bear the tension any longer. "I think we need to discuss last night," I started, but my words faltered, overwhelmed by uncertainty. Veronica turned to me, a knowing look on her face, her smile softening. "I thought you'd be thinking about it," she replied, leaning casually against the counter. "You don't need to worry." "How can I not worry?" I exclaimed, frustration creeping into my voice. "What happened was, it was just—" Veronica raised a hand, halting my rambling. "I realize it was unexpected," she said, "but it doesn't have to be complicated. We're adults and we made a decision together. We can leave it at that or—" Her voice trailed off, and I noticed how she tilted her head, her gaze locking onto mine. "We can explore this further." My heart raced. I hadn't expected her to say that. Veronica wasn't treating it as a blunder or a mistake. She didn't seem bothered by the fact that we had crossed a line. Instead, she appeared calm and composed, as if she had already thought this through and was now giving me a choice. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice softer now, unsure of what I wanted her answer to be. Stepping closer, Veronica moved with purpose. "I mean, if you're interested, if Landon is too, we don't have to end things here." Her hand grazed my arm, reigniting the warmth I had felt the night before. "There's no need to make things awkward unless you choose that." I swallowed hard, struggling to comprehend what she was suggesting. Was this genuinely an option? Could this continue? And if it did, what would it mean for us? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. I glanced down to see a text from Landon. "Hey man, what's up?" Veronica noticed the message too, and a small smile crept across her face. "Looks like Landon's curious," she remarked lightly. "Maybe he's wondering if last night was just a one-time thing." I stared at the text, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. Part of me wanted to say it was over, that last night had been a mistake, just a moment of poor judgment fueled by too much wine. But another part, the part that had been caught up in Veronica's touch and kiss, wasn't so sure. I quickly typed back, "Are you free later? We should talk." Landon arrived that afternoon, and as soon as he stepped through the door, I could tell he was just as bewildered as I was. He avoided making eye contact at first, scanning the room as if he half expected Veronica to appear. "So, what the hell went down last night?" he finally asked, his voice low and uncertain. I leaned back on the couch, searching for the right words. "I don't know, man. It just happened." Landon sat down across from me, shaking his head in disbelief. "But that was your stepmom. We were both involved." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly grappling with the reality of the situation. I'm at a loss for what to make of it. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Should I tell him about my earlier conversation with Veronica? How she had hinted at the possibility of continuing whatever this was. Before I could decide, Veronica entered the room, her presence instantly commanding attention. She looked at Landon, then at me, and offered a warm smile. "Hey, Landon," she greeted him smoothly, her voice inviting. "I was hoping we could have a chat." Landon's eyes widened slightly, and he glanced at me, clearly unsure of what was about to unfold. Veronica settled beside me, her hand brushing my knee before she turned to face Landon. "I know last night was a surprise," she began, her tone calm and reassuring. "But I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I don't want things to become awkward between us. What happened doesn't have to be a one-off, but only if you both want it." Landon blinked, visibly taken aback by her directness. He glanced at me, confusion evident in his expression. But beneath that confusion, I sensed something else. A flicker of curiosity, a spark of desire. The same feelings I had been wrestling with all day. Veronica continued, her voice steady yet gentle. "I'm not looking for anything serious. This doesn't have to be complicated. I'm offering you both something different, something thrilling, but only if you're comfortable with it." A long pause ensued as Landon and I exchanged glances, grappling with what Veronica was suggesting. The air around us was thick with tension, sending my pulse racing and my thoughts spiraling. Finally, Landon spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "And if we say yes, then what happens?" Veronica's smile widened. "Then we take it as it comes," she replied simply. "No pressure, no strings, just us." I could feel the electricity in the room as the weight of Veronica's words settled in. This was serious. She meant it, and now the choice lay before us. Landon looked at me once more, his eyes searching for reassurance, a sign of what I was thinking. In that instant, I realized I didn't want to say no. The part of me that had been resisting, that feared the implications, was yielding to the part that craved more. I nodded slowly, my heart racing. "I'm in," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Landon hesitated for a heartbeat longer, but then nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I'm in." Veronica beamed, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction. She stood and stepped toward Landon, reaching out to touch his arm. "Good," she whispered. "Let's not waste any more time." Leaning in, she kissed him softly, her lips lingering against his for just a moment before she pulled back. Then she turned to me, her eyes filled with promise as she leaned down and kissed me with the same soft, lingering tenderness that sent shivers through my body. As she drew back, she smiled at both of us, her gaze intense and filled with anticipation. "Now," she said softly, "let's continue what we started." The rest of the afternoon blurred into a whirlwind of sensations. Kisses, caresses, and the heat of our bodies entwined as we explored this new and exhilarating territory. Veronica took charge, guiding us both, her touch igniting a fire within me that I hadn't known existed. Every time I thought we might be pushing boundaries, she would pull us back, reassuring us with a kiss, a whisper, a gentle caress. Landon and I found ourselves moving in unison, our bodies syncing with Veronica's rhythm. The tension among us swelled until it erupted into a moment of pure, unfiltered passion. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just the three of us entirely lost in the moment.